What is cracking, everybody? Hello and welcome back to Gaming 101 with Mr. Berger, and I guess with Miss Clarissa tonight too, right? Alright, so guys, the Rage Challenge is here, and I've been having an absolute blast with this thing. I did one run through with this deck, and it was like a Giant Witch Beatdown deck, and I'm like, okay, Giant Witch sounds awesome for Rage Challenge, because everything's raged, and you get more elixir and all that good stuff. And I watched a few videos and things like that. One thing that I noticed, one of the decks that really beat me with that Giant Witch deck that I was running was this spawner deck. I'm like, this guy is putting down all kinds of stuff, and if I lightning his elixir pump, then he's got all these massive spawner buildings that pop out and just, you know, plow me down eventually. And if I try to spell or lightning or poison or any of their spawner buildings, then he can safely stack up his elixir pumps. So right after that, actually it was just earlier this morning, I think, I saw this video, and OJ was talking about how he had this counter deck for the spawner decks. And I was like, oh, there's the spawner deck that I've seen everywhere. And I'm like, rather than using the counter deck, I want to try the cheap spawner deck first, and then if it becomes a problem, I'll switch over to the counter one. And I had success, pretty good success with this. I went 10 wins before I dropped out, I believe, with this deck. Which is pretty good for me, because I'm not that great of a player, so 10 out of 12 is pretty solid. So not only did I see it on OJ's video, but I looked at some of the websites like Stats Royale and Royale API, and this was like the second most used deck in the challenge. So I'm like, alright guys, let's give it a shot. And as you can see here in this first example, you can just build up a massive wave, massive army, and eventually just plow through your opponents. So I will be talking a little bit about strategy and like card selection and stuff. But a lot of this video is going to be more just talking about the replays and going into my decision making and things like that, and just kind of showing the power of the deck. I have so many replays for this deck because it's so hilarious and there's so many funny matches. So for openers, you can see I generally open with one of my spawner buildings if possible, and then if I get the chance, I try to cycle to an elixir pump. Ideally, if I do have an elixir pump in hand as an opener, I'm going to use that in the safe spot right above my king tower. In case they have a rocket, they'll be able to rocket the elixir pump but not get any chip damage off on the tower as well. If you use it, you know, a little bit closer to your princess tower, then it's at risk of it being rocketed and then them also getting value by hitting your princess tower too. And as you can see there's going to be quite a few matches where I actually lose a tower, but I end up in double elixir time, or once I've built up some elixir pumps, I end up being able to build up this massive wave and get this kind of huge comeback going. So that's kind of my opening moves. After a little while, you build up the elixir, and that's kind of what you want to go for. You want to get that elixir advantage going, and then be patient. You know, don't worry about losing a tower, even 2 towers. And then towards like double elixir time or later in the match, that's generally when you're going to shine, because you get the chance to just build up a massive wave, not only a wave of units, but just like look at the amount of buildings on the map right now. Like, this is crazy. Because not only is everything spawning faster because it's in permanent rage, but there's more overall units spawned, and I'm also gaining elixir a lot quicker, so I can afford to put down things like Barbarian huts. And you can see here, I'm like, alright guys, lost both my towers, who cares? I'm going to go full on in the right lane there, and I'm just going to try to build up a massive army with all the spawner buildings and try to plow through and destroy his king tower. And you can see he's placing down a lot of things to try to counter my waves. He used the Valkyrie, he used the Zap, and right now he's just trying to invest in shutting down my massive army that's up there. But in the meantime, all those buildings down there are continuing to spawn, so the value that he's investing in trying to counter the units that are there is not being spent on countering the buildings that are down towards my king tower. So he doesn't have a chance to, you know, over time, counter that massive army that just continues to come at him. So that was a really solid comeback, and I believe that this example is another one as well. It's another good example of a comeback. So one thing that I noticed, though, especially in like mirror matchups, is you want to go for, I mean, not you want to go for, yeah, well, you want to go for getting the elixir pump down, right? So if you get the elixir pump in your hand first, then you generally have an advantage. So if you get unlucky and you get that elixir pump in hand late, then, you know, tough luck, that's how it goes, and sometimes that's how these heavy decks are played and these elixir pump decks are played. If you don't get it in your hand early on, then you won't get any opportunity to get that elixir advantage early on. You know, sometimes if you try to place it down a little bit later, they've already destroyed one of your towers and they can kind of play defense throughout the rest of the match, or they've already kind of gotten the advantage, the elixir advantage, and have gotten the control of the battlefield and so on and so forth. So anyway, at this point, I'm like, alright, I lost the tower. I'm going to go hard in defending on the right, or excuse me, building up on the right, but I do need to defend on the left there because he has a big push going down. Now, the Zappies and the Flying Machine, I want to talk about that because those are interesting choices. The Zappies are really cool when they're raged because they attack so quickly that they stun even faster, so they shut down a lot of things. They perma-stun a lot of like heavy units like the Giant, so that they, you know, not like completely don't move, but almost never move at all. So you can see I got one elixir pump and then I invested in getting another one down. And since I was able to defend in the left there, now I'm just putting all my elixir into, you know, building spawner buildings on the right. Now the Flying Machine, now that he's down there, let's talk about that. I'm not 100% sure of the reason why he's in this deck, and I think that it's kind of a flexible spot. I think you could probably put Musketeer or something in there as well. But I think it's just kind of because he is first of all, an air unit. You don't have any air units in this deck. But he has that massive range, and he has that tendency to kind of stay alive and stay in the back and build up. So while your spawner buildings are just building up this huge army, you got that Flying Machine is really solid support in the back there. And the Zappies, again, I'm not 100% sure why they're in this deck, and I think that they're a flexible spot. But I kind of wanted to go with the deck that was being used now, so I tried it out, and they work out really well. I think it must be the synergy that they have with that permanent rage effect. And again, guys, look at this replay here. It just gets to a point where I've got like 10 buildings on the map. It's like, what did you say? It's like playing Clash of Clans.
Yeah.
It's like I'm playing Clash of Clans. Yeah, instead of Clash Royale. And you can see, even though I lost that tower there, I've got such a huge army built up on the right, and I'm investing in the elixir pumps on the left there. But even if he tries to spell or, you know, lightning or poison any of my buildings, I've got so many on the field that I can just kind of gain advantage of the other buildings that aren't hit by the spell. And there's just nothing he can do now. We just build up this huge army. And I think one of these is probably going to be the thumbnail. One of these screenshots from these replays of these huge armies and massive buildings.
Might as well show it off.
Yeah. Alright, this is against Nova 1 Pompeo, but I mean, come on, you're kidding me. This isn't the real Pompeo. Anyway, let's go ahead and jump into this replay here and see how it goes. And you can see that I don't have the elixir pump in my starting hand. So, unfortunately, I can't get it down until a little bit later. So one thing that I noticed in a lot of these decks too is that there's Magic Archer in there, and I think that Magic Archer actually has pretty solid value. In this challenge, you know, he attacks really quickly, he stays in the back and stays alive for a long time. There's something to say for units that like are slow, have long range, and just stay alive for a long time in this challenge, because there's just always this constant onslaught of units coming at you. So if you have a unit like a bowler that kind of just plods along and, you know, does the support role, lives for a long time because he's really slow, you can gain huge value from that. So Magic Archer is kind of one of those units that I've seen used pretty well in this Rage challenge. So at this point you can see he's sniping all my units from afar, so it's a pretty solid counter to all those spawner buildings, because he outranges them and just takes them out before they can even connect. And see here, he's sniping the Zappies, he was sniping the Barbarians, and then getting the Barbarian Hut too, and that one Magic Archer staying alive for a really long time. It doesn't do too much damage though, so I'm able to take him out with, I think the Zappy is what got him. And then here comes this massive wave, but Bomber actually does a pretty solid job of shutting it down there. So you can see this is generally my strategy here, is I pump up in one lane, so I've got the right lane with the pumps because they're a little bit safer over there, as I'm trying to push in the opposite lane, because they're going to put all their units and all their spells into countering my massive army and all my spawner buildings and things like that. So it's a little bit safer for me to pump up in the opposite lane. Of course, you know, it's all situational. Sometimes I'll have a pump mixed up in there in the spawner buildings, but this is kind of my general strategy that I have going on here. Alright, see that Magic Archer again, gaining huge value. And Bomber, that's an interesting choice. I know Bomber was buffed, but I feel like it's still a, you know, not a great card, and there are other really solid alternatives that you could put in there instead. But regardless, the Bomber does a good job of countering those spawner buildings, or those massive units spawned by the spawner buildings, right? I'm not sure why he gave me a noobs there, but at this point, I have a whole bunch of stuff built up. We're in double elixir time, so I go ahead and commit into poisoning, you know, his units and his, what is it, Princess Tower there. And I just need to get the one tower down because we've only got 30 seconds left before the match is over. And then I can pretty much move on to the next one and see how it goes. So, Magic Archer again, gaining that value. But you guys can see there's just so many spawner buildings at this point. I mean, I'm running out of spots to put them. Like, I've rarely ever been in a situation where you've got to place your spawner buildings like right in front of your princess towers because you've literally got nowhere else to put them. I mean, I've seen that before in some, you know, like double or triple elixir challenges if you're running like double or triple spawner buildings and mirror or something like that. But this is just ridiculous. I mean, I'm getting to the point where I'm having to double up and put 2 rows of them in front of the princess tower. I've got like 4 elixir pumps alive at the same time on the right there. And then at this point, there's just nothing he can do. I give him a good game because I see that I have a massive army coming up and the poison, and now that huge army just pretty much finishes off the tower there. Alright guys, let's go ahead and jump into a few more. These last ones, again, it's just going to kind of be me running through the replays and commentating on what happens there, because I kind of ran through the strategies of the deck already. You know, pump up, get those spawner buildings out there, and just dominate. So there, I take some pretty good damage on that furnace with the bandit coming in, and he's cycling Goblin Gang in the back, which isn't too bad for me. Now the reason that I put the pump up there is exactly for that, because he's got the rocket, and he gets some good value by hitting the furnace as well with the rocket. But if I'm not mistaken, then the elixir pump already got some value by gaining an elixir or 2. And if it just gains 1 or 2 elixir and then he rockets it, then it's a positive trade for you, because he spent 6 on something that you spent 6 on, but you got that bonus elixir. So as long as he doesn't, you know, chip away at your tower as well with the rocket, then you're kind of in the lead in that situation. And it's really interesting. I believe this is the one where the guy rocketed that first elixir pump, but then he didn't later at all. Like, I never saw the rocket on a pump again. And, you know, sometimes the reason for that might be because I get so many units built up that he doesn't want to invest that 6 elixir into sending in a rocket. He needs to make sure that he's defending against whatever, you know, I put down. So I'm getting that elixir advantage with that 1 elixir pump there because it's staying alive for a long time. And in the meantime, I'm just trying to slowly ramp up all the buildings on the right. And you can see, I try to get that elixir pump down pretty much every time that I have it in hand. And, you know guys, like I said, I only won 10 matches, so that means I lost 3. And some of the ones where I lost the matches involved, like, them having lightning in hand and always being able to counter my elixir pump. So there's definitely a lot of counter decks out there. If you watch OJ's video, he did one this morning on how to counter this deck, and it involved like Boulder. I think it was a variation of his 3 Musketeers deck or something like that. It involved the Boulder because the Boulder, like I said, just stays alive for a long time and provides a really solid defense against all those swarmy spawner building units. So there's certain things that counter it, but oftentimes, you know, people are just still trying out the challenge or trying certain different variations. They might not be trying to build a deck that counters your deck specifically. So it's still a really strong deck overall. And here we go again, pumping up in the left this time. And because I'm providing so much pressure in the right there, he has no chance to rocket and take out any of my pumps. So for every few seconds that I live, or that those pumps live, I'm gaining more and more of an elixir advantage, allowing me to build up my army in the right more and more. And at this point, I try to get the flying machine down because I do want to give my spawner units some support there. But generally, I want to invest as much elixir and as much of my rotation as possible into getting more and more spawner buildings down. It's only really later on in the match that I, you know, really try to put down that flying machine and those zappies. And, you know, one of the matches that I lost against, actually, the guy did a good job of switching over from trying to pump up to putting down flying machine and more spawner buildings a little bit more, and that was how he managed to beat me. So, you know, maybe I'll do another run with this deck and see how it goes, and you know, try to adapt and see how I can switch it up, or maybe I have to play that counter deck. Regardless, this is just getting ridiculous here. In the left, you can see there's so many pumps, and again, I'm getting to a point where I have 2 layers of buildings, and I have to start putting up a 3rd layer in the right. And, you know, there's just nothing he can do at that point. I got the zappies down, I got the flying machine down, and the tower is just finished off. Alright guys, just a couple more replays. I wanted to go ahead and get all these replays that I saved in, because I figured, hey, challenge is going to be over soon. Maybe by the time this video is out, and it'll be over already, who knows, by the time I get around to editing it and uploading it and everything. But regardless, I was like, you know, this is such an awesome challenge. I had so much fun with this deck. I really wanted to, like, fit everything in there. And, you know, showcase how I countered all these different decks, or I beat all these different decks that I came across in this challenge. I probably should include some replays where I lose. Maybe I'll consider doing that, and I do that in some of my videos. to kind of talk about my mistakes and where I could have done things better. Now, here's another example of taking a ton of damage on one tower, and I kind of go into the mindset of like, oh man, I misplayed that and I should have defended harder. But you'll notice that I got that elixir pump in the left there, and it's just ticking away. And in this rage challenge, the overall amount of elixir that the elixir pumps gain is more than in the normal mode. I think it's like 1 or 2 extra elixir overall than normally. It doesn't decay, the health doesn't decay faster, although it gains elixir faster, so the overall amount is increased. So just getting that one pump down can give you this huge advantage if they don't do anything to counter it. So even though I take a bunch of damage on the right tower there from the P.E.K.K.A and that E-Wiz early on, I'm able to keep building up the spawner buildings and keep building up the pumps, gain that elixir advantage. And here's where I counter that P.E.K.K.A and I've got a huge army coming in. And at this point, you'll see they start having to counter that army. They have to counter all the units. And again, that makes it so that they can't invest elixir in countering all the buildings. So while he's putting that executioner down and all those things down to try to counter the army and defend his princess tower, I'm investing even more elixir into putting down more spawners and more pumps to get even more elixir, and yeah, exactly. And overall, win the game in the long run. Now, he does use a poison there, but I think he could have placed it where he got more buildings probably. It wasn't the best positioning for the poison. And sometimes that might be because the opponent kind of becomes overwhelmed. They're like, oh, there's so many units coming at me at once. I'm not sure how to handle this. This is so off meta and weird, and like I haven't seen this since spawner buildings were a thing back in 2016 or whatever, right? So maybe that is the reasoning for that oddly placed poison. Regardless, even though he used that poison, even if he had used it to counter a bunch of my buildings, that would have made it even safer for me to put down more pumps and gain more of an elixir advantage and win in the long run. And there's a little bit better placed poison. See, it hits like 3 of the buildings and my princess tower as well. But regardless, there's just so many of them down that even though he hits so many of those spawner buildings, there's just more of them. He can't possibly hit all of them, and the army just keeps on coming. Alright guys, this is the last one here, and this is a good example of how I made that decision at the end. I kind of learned from one where I lost and the opponent invested a little bit more in offense rather than trying to pump up, and that's what I did here. And I'm not sure, let's look at what this opponent has here. A lot of these decks that beat me are ones that run like Fireball and Lightning. Yeah, and this is one of the ones that is doing that, because they're always going to have an answer to your pump. So he's always going to be able to like Fireball my spawner buildings and then Lightning my pump, or I think this guy in most cases Fireballs the pump and Lightnings all the spawner buildings, tries to take them out with the Lightning. And he's got a pretty similar deck. He's running that Magic Archer, which is a pretty solid pickup like I mentioned earlier, because it stays alive, stays in the back, has super long range. I don't know how I feel about that poison. I was kind of like thinking, oh, what do I want to do here? Maybe not the best decision, but it does get a little bit of chip damage off on the Magic Archer, chips away at the Princess Tower, and of course, the main reason I put it down there was to counter that furnace in the back there. I don't want to allow him to build up this huge army like I'm doing, so I kind of wanted to counter that furnace there, but now I see that he has a pump as well, so I could have poisoned that pump, but it's probably going to be too late at this point. I think what I was thinking at this point was to try to cycle back to that poison and try to get that pump down again, but I think it's going to be too late. He's already gotten a lot of elixir from it. And look at that, the lightning. Every time he lightnings, not only does it like pretty much take out my spawner buildings, but it chips away at the Princess Tower as well. So I'm taking that damage on my tower, and if he keeps doing that throughout the match, he can literally just win from lightninging my tower like 10 times or whatever it is. I'm sure somebody like OJ did the math already on how many times you have to lightning a tower to kill it, but I'm sure it's some not too high number like that. You don't have to lightning the tower 200 times. It's probably only like 10 or 15 times, so you can still spell cycle to win. So every time he does that, I'm risking taking damage on the Princess Tower. And here I'm like, alright, well, I don't know if I'm going to be able to win the long battle, so I might try to not play into overtime too much, or overtime at all, and try to win once the timer actually gets to 0 minutes and right before we go into overtime, right as we go into overtime. So I start playing a little bit more offense. I do want to get that pump down. I see that he used the Fireball. He has Lightning in hand, and again, probably not the best pump. But now that he lightning the pump, he doesn't have it for any of my spawner buildings. So I decided, okay, I'm going to go a little bit more offensively. I'm going to use the flying machine up there because I just need to kind of chip away at that right tower. Because his tower, although he's pumping up, yeah, and he's getting more elixir, his tower has a little bit less health. So I'm wondering, okay, can I like poison chip here, keep putting up the spawner buildings? The magic archer of his goes in the left lane, and he's starting to build up spawner buildings in the left lane. You can see that his right tower gets really low at this point, so I'm like, alright, I'm going to go all out on the right. I'm going to use the zappies, I'm going to chip away at it with the log there, and he kind of frantically fireballs to take away the zappies, but that allows me to safely put out my flying machine and more spawner buildings because it doesn't have that to counter them. And the flying machine's massive range, combo with the poison there, is enough to pretty much finish off the tower there. And that was my last win. Woohoo! Now guys, again, I did not get 12 wins in this match. I'm going to probably try it again with this deck because I was having a lot of fun with it. I know that people have gotten 12 wins with this deck and other decks with it, so, give it a try. Let me know what you guys think. I really like this challenge. I think this is one of those challenges that was like recommended by a user on Reddit, and they made it into a real thing. And pretty much like since Rumham has joined the Clash Royale team, Supercell's team, they've been doing a lot more like responding to and actually implementing ideas that are suggested by the community, and Reddit is the major place where they do that because that's basically like the official Clash Royale forum at this point. Alright guys, so thank you so much for watching this video. Make sure that you do all the stereotypical YouTube stuff like, comment, subscribe, and share. Yeah, thanks so much for watching guys. Have a good night.